These are freshly homemade puff pastry knots with a crispy outer layer and flaky inside, stuffed with chocolatey Nutella. These pastry knots are sure to be a hit. This puff pastry recipe is super malleable, so you can fill it with really anything that you want, whether it be Biscoff spread or pistachio spread, or even cinnamon sugar to give it that cinnamon roll feel. You can add virtually anything to this puff pastry and it'll be absolutely delicious. So let's get started. Okay, so I didn't get this on video, but the first thing that you want to do is put your butter in the freezer. You want it to be super, super cold so that it doesn't melt in the process of making this dough. Then you're going to grab a large bowl and you're going to add all of your dry ingredients and you're just going to mix them together until they're nice and combined. After the butter is nice and cold, you're going to grab a cheese grater and you're going to grate the butter into your dry ingredients. Now you're not going to do this all at once, you're going to do this incrementally. So you're going to grate a little bit of your butter and then you're going to mix it into the dry ingredients so that it gets nice and combined, but you want to make sure that the butter is not clumping. So you want to keep those little individual strands intact as you're mixing it. And once you've mixed it up, you're going to add a little bit more butter and repeat the same process over and over again. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is a pretty tedious process, especially if your butter is really, really cold like mine was when I was making this. My butter had been sitting in the freezer for a few weeks, so it was really, really hard to grate. I wouldn't recommend for the butter to be that cold. Just place it maybe for 10 to 20 minutes in the freezer and that should be okay. But the whole point of grating the butter into these dry ingredients is to really allow for those layers in the puff pastry when we're going to be baking it. And that's what's going to give it that nice flaky, buttery texture, which is what we're looking for here. So you're just going to keep grating until you have all your butter in there and it's nice and combined. If you do find that your butter is melting as you're grating it, place the bowl in the fridge for like 5 minutes. You really don't want your butter to be melting in the process of this. So do what you got to do to keep your butter cold and it not melting. So as you can see here, the butter is really starting to get incorporated in here, but you can still see the individual strands of butter intact as they're being mixed into the dry ingredients. And that's what you want to keep that flaky texture when you're going to be baking it. Now, once the butter is fully grated into the dry ingredients, you're going to set this aside, but you're going to put it in the fridge just to let it cool. We don't want the butter to melt. And while that's sitting in the fridge, we're going to prepare our cold water and our cream. We want this water to be as cold as possible to not melt the butter again. So you're going to grab a cup with some ice and you're going to pour your water into this ice. And you want to let it get as cold as possible. Once the water has had a moment to chill, you're going to grab your bowl and you're going to start pouring your water and your cream into your dry ingredients and your butter. But you're going to do this 2 tablespoons at a time and very gently to keep the butter intact. So you're going to pour in 2 tablespoons of your cold water and you're going to mix it gently, making sure it's fully incorporated. And then you're going to pour 2 tablespoons of your heavy cream and you're going to mix it until it's fully incorporated, very gently again to make sure the butter is still intact. And you're going to repeat this process until you have all of your water and all of your butter incorporated into the dough. 2 tablespoons of each at a time. You'll notice that as you add more and more liquid to the dough, it does get a little bit more crumbly and it starts to stick a little bit more together, but the butter is still intact. Okay, so you can see here that the dough is really starting to come together. So once you've gotten all of the liquids incorporated into the dough, you can use your hand to roll this dough into a ball. Again, I can't say this enough, keeping intact the butter as you're rolling it. You also probably want to make sure that your hands are not super hot for this process because it will melt it. So rinsing your hands under cold water before touching it and placing it in the fridge for 5 minutes if it needs to be done. And once it's rolled up, it'll look a little bit something like this. And you're going to grab a piece of plastic wrap and you're going to flatten out the dough a little bit and you're just going to wrap it in the plastic wrap. Flatten it out to about 1 inch thick and wrap it around, and you're going to place this in the fridge for about half an hour just to let the dough set and let the butter get cold again. Once the dough has chilled, you're going to lightly flour a rolling surface. You're going to grab your dough, take it out of the plastic wrap, and place it on this lightly floured surface. You can kind of roll it around on the lightly floured surface like this so it doesn't stick when you're going to be rolling it out. And you're just going to roll it out to about 1/2 inch thick. And you want to try to get a rectangular shape if possible. If you need to, also place a little bit of flour on the rolling pin so that it doesn't stick to the dough. And do try to move it around a little bit as you're rolling it out just to make sure that it's not sticking to the bottom of whatever you're rolling your dough on, because the butter can pretty easily get stuck, so you just want to make sure that it's not sticking. So once you've rolled it out, you're going to fold it over like a letter. So 1/3 of it this way, and then the other third of it on top like that. You're going to turn it around and you're going to roll it out again to about 1/2 inch thick like this. This is kind of similar to the croissant process and how you get the layers for that. And this is just going to add to the layers to the puff pastry and really make it that flaky texture. And once you've rolled it out, you're going to fold it again in the same way. And you're going to roll it out again to about 1/2 inch thick. And once you've rolled it out, you're going to fold it again. So 1/3 over and then the other third over that one. And from here, you're just going to flatten it out a little bit. And then you're going to grab a piece of plastic wrap and just wrap it tightly in that plastic wrap. And you're going to pop this in the fridge for about 1 hour or 2, or you can leave it overnight if you wanted. And from here, you can do whatever you want. This is ready to go puff pastry dough. But for the sake of this video, we're going to be making pastry knots. So once your dough has chilled, you can lightly flour a rolling surface. You're going to grab your dough from the fridge and you're going to place it on your lightly floured surface. Again, you can kind of roll it around, maybe add a little bit of flour on top, but not too much. And you're just going to start rolling it out. Here for these pastry knots, I'm rolling it out to about 1/2 to 1/4 inch thick. But again, this is totally up to you. Just note that the baking times might be a little bit different if you're making them a little bit thinner or a little bit thicker in size. So at this point, the dough should be fairly easy. It's a little bit stiff because it's been in the fridge, but it should be fairly easy to roll it out to however thin you want it. Here I'm going to do about 1/2 to 1/4 inch thick. And from here, to get those clean lines, you can kind of cut off the edges. Just trim it so that it's those nice straight lines. And from here, you're going to cut through the middle of the dough, just to cut it in half. And from here, you can grab your Nutella and just plop it on. I didn't soften mine. I would highly recommend doing that. It might make it a little bit easier to spread it out. Just pop it in the microwave for like 5 to 10 seconds. Because you can see here it's a little bit stiff when I'm trying to spread it out. Now there's two techniques that I use here for the knots. One of them is a wreath style and the other is knots. So if you want the wreath style, you're going to do this. Once your Nutella has spread, you're going to roll this out kind of like a cinnamon roll. And you're going to grab a knife and you're going to cut through the center of this roll. And you're going to flip over each side, kind of like a braid, one on top of the other, kind of like twisting them together, making sure that the top of it has what has been cut, so it has those nice edges. And you're going to wrap it around so that it connects together, just like so. You're going to grab a baking sheet with a lined piece of parchment paper, lightly grease it, and you're going to place your puff pastry on top of the cookie sheet. And you're going to pop this in the freezer for about 15 to 20 minutes. Now, if you wanted to do the knots, this is how you're going to do them. It's the same process of rolling it out and adding the Nutella and spreading it out evenly. But from here, you're going to cut this puff pastry in two. And you're going to place one half on top of the other, just like this. Now you can cut this into again or however many you wanted to make. And you're going to grab one of your strips and you're just going to twist it around like so. And then twist it into itself, into a circle essentially, and wrap it underneath like so. So again, you're going to grab the strip and you're going to twist it as much as you can, or as much as the dough will let it. And then you're going to wrap it around and place it through the bottom. And again, you're going to place these on a piece of parchment paper on a cookie sheet that is lightly greased, and you're going to pop these in the freezer for about 15 to 20 minutes before baking them. Now, once these have chilled in the freezer, you're going to grab your egg wash, which is just an egg with a little bit of milk in it, and you're just going to dab it on top of the puff pastries. This is what's going to give it that nice brown, golden, crispy outer texture. So highly recommend doing this. You're going to preheat your oven to 350, and you're going to bake these till they are nice and golden brown. So anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes. Of course, everyone's oven is different, so keep an eye out on these. Check them at about half an hour and go from there until they have that nice brown, crispy edge. And there you have homemade fresh puff pastry knots. These are so delicious. They're so buttery, so flaky, so crispy. These are perfect for the holidays. I highly recommend making these. As always, if you like this recipe, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments what kind of recipes you want more of.